So my talk today is called Just Leap with an exclamation point at the end. I'm very excited about this subject. So the thing is, the talk that I would have given with this very same title in the before times, before 2020 and COVID, is quite different than the talk I'm going to offer you today. Why is that? Because COVID changed us in a multitude of ways, including, whether we realize it or not, the reordering of things, the reordering of our priorities. Living through the fear of a deadly contagion in the very air we breathe for years put things in perspective, yes. Once we began to get vaccines and immunity was building and we emerged from our homes, remember re-peopling was so weird? It still is. Oh, bless you. Introverts unite. I get it. But you remember, like everything that back in 2020, that original placement of what had been locked in, what had clicked in our lives, no longer clicked back in the same way as we emerged from our homes. In the before times, we as a collective, I believe, existed in a thicker fog around what is most important and most precious in life. For those of us who came out of that time, the idea of just leap with an exclamation mark holds far more weight and meaning to it if we allow ourselves to go deeper. Just for a moment, consider who you were back in April of 2020. As opposed to now, April of 2024. Consider how you see the world differently. Consider how much you've learned about yourself these past 4 years. Consider how much you have learned about how deeply you love your people, how deeply you love your spiritual community, how deeper you experience divinity moment by moment in the little things. I believe that each one of us is being asked all the time to take leaps of faith for the benefit of our soul growth. So when we think about taking a leap, most of us think big things, which is absolutely great and fine. Things like moving to that city or going back to school or marrying that person or quitting that habit that's no longer serving us or leaving a job or writing that book or ending that toxic relationship or starting that business. But today, in addition to those big things, I am also talking about, and perhaps more importantly, the little leaps of faith that divinity within us is asking us to lean into every day. Let's call them baby leaps. It's leap year after all. Ba-dum-bum. Okay, I couldn't resist that. But baby leaps, like, finally completing that seemingly small task that we know will improve the quality of our life. Anyone? Those? The small leaps. Maybe it's as simple as taking that walk or taking that rest or getting rid of that thing or eating vegetables or having that courageous conversation and everything in between. We are asked to take leaps of faith every single day. And I believe when we can put it in that context, it makes it more conscious. It was the 19th century Danish Christian philosopher Kierkegaard who coined the phrase leap of faith. Bless you. According to Kierkegaard, having faith in something, taking a leap of faith, required one to figuratively leap over the emotional and psychological boundaries of logic and reason to trust whatever that thing is. So, a leap of faith, then, is often a leap over logic, which I don't know about you, is not always easy. The spiritual principle, what I'm talking about today, is faith and trust. A true leap of faith requires that we use our intuition. A true leap of faith is not a rational decision. A rational decision is just that. And rational decision-making is not what I'm talking about today. Have you ever made a pro and con list? Anybody? A pro and con list. And when you looked at your completed list, it was clear on paper the decision you should make. However, your gut, your heart, your intuition may have had a completely different feeling about the whole entire shebang. You shouldn't, things like, on your list, things that in the two columns, you shouldn't do, things you should do, the shoulding that we do all over ourselves, yes. But as you look at that logical list, your feeling, your heart, your intuition, as Ernest Holmes called it, your God voice, is having a completely different experience. Now, in this kind of decision-making, it requires discernment, making sure that the feeling that you're having is actually your intuition and not your ego. That's another talk. But I invite you in that moment of discernment in your list to recognize. And the way we know that is heart, spirit, God never shoulds on us. It's only love. So if you look back on the moments of inner divine guidance you have had in your life, the wisdom and the outcome for your soul is undeniable. This month, I've been talking about normalizing the woo-woo, because why not? It's just us. What I mean by that is that we get to live our lives in direct and continuous communication with the divine. And that is, in truth, the most normal thing. The most aligned thing. When we pull the man God out of the sky and we live our life recognizing, as we just sang, that the face of God is always in everyone we meet, and the flowers popping up through the sidewalk, and the redwoods, and the sound of the children playing, and the tears of our grief, which are simply an outward expression of the depths of our love, and the miracles of life, and the mysteries of life. When we recognize that all of it is the face of God showing up, we are in full and continuous communication with Spirit or God. We are, in essence, praying ceaselessly. Not because we are begging and beseeching, that which some of us may have learned in our religion of origin. There's no begging and beseeching in communication with the divine. It is the easiest thing in the world. It is automatic. It is instant, and it is loving. Last week, I talked about the idea that if we are open, we can have this direct and internal, continuous conversation with the divine, that Spirit is communicating with us all the time in the form of inner nudges, aha moments, those synchronicities that show up in our life, the right book, the right class, the right kindred spirits that you meet, the lyric in the song that catches you in the produce aisle of the grocery store and stops you still. the experienced grace through others that you recognize is just for you because it is personal to you. It is not about searching for a sign outside of ourselves, rather recognizing the divine communication is always happening on our behalf. Why? Because the universe always has your back. That is a flip side to what many of us grew up understanding. It's a paradigm shift. The universe is always on your side. And as we lean into, in an even greater way, the recognition of the presence of God or divine or spirit or whatever word works for you, that this is happening everywhere, it makes the holy in our lives highlighted. It reminds us of what is truly sacred. All amidst the business of the rushing and the doing, the mundane things in life that we must do in order to live in this world of matter. But when we can bring our conscious awareness to our eternal communication and relationship with unconditional love, or the universe, then we can normalize spirit as the most true and constant thing. And in doing this, our little and large leaps feel held, and they feel knitted together by divinity itself. So, today, I want to link this idea of living into leaps of faith as our normal way of being. This love, this inner wisdom at the center of us that is indeed right here, closer than hands and feet, or as it states in the Quran, closer than my very jugular vein. That is how close this love is. When we recognize that, our leaps of faith simply become our way of being in the world. So let's start with baby leaps. I remember a time in my life several decades ago, I took a baby leap that changed my entire life. I made a seemingly small step that changed everything. I'd been going to a New Thought church for about a year, and one Sunday, I got this nudge to stay after service instead of bolting out to the parking lot and getting in my car and driving as fast as I could home. Anybody? No judgment. I had this inner nudge, this inner call to stay and ask for prayer with a practitioner afterwards. And I remember sitting in my seat thinking, no way. I had this pit. It was so out of my comfort zone, so out of anything I had grown up with. And I remember I just took a deep breath. I took that little leap of faith. My hands shaking, my voice shaking. I don't remember what I said, but I remember it was an incredibly vulnerable moment for me as I stepped up and asked for prayer. And that baby leap changed my life. It's one of the reasons that I'm here today. The baby steps of faith you take change your life. Ernest Holmes wrote, I live in the faith that there is a presence and power greater than I am that nurtures and supports me in ways I could not even imagine. I know that this presence is all-knowing and all-power and is always right where I am. I know this presence is all-knowing and all-power and is always right where I am. It's a loving, non-judgmental power. Here's the thing. Taking a conscious leap of faith is never actually about the thing over there, or the place, or the final product. It is always rather, about you having faith in yourself and spirit within you to choose to grow. That's what it's really about. So the question then becomes, where in your own life are you ready to grow? I know we have some new meditators coming to my meditation retreat, which is coming up in the beginning of May, and I have it on good authority that for some of you is a leap of faith because you're new to meditation. So I want to say to you, congratulations. What a beautiful way of teaching the rest of us, of reminding the rest of us to take those leaps of faith. So I ask you, what area in your own life could you do just a little more leaping? You're never going to hear the word leap in the same way again after this talk, I promise. Maybe for you it looks like, I don't know, going on one of those dating apps, putting yourself out there. Or maybe the leap for you looks like going to the doctor or the therapist to face the pain that you are experiencing right now. Maybe the leap for you is calling that relative or loved one who you have been estranged from, or apologizing for that unskilled moment, whether it was yesterday or 10 years ago. Maybe for you, the leap is finally forgiving yourself for that thing, or stopping the blame of someone else or yourself for that thing. We are all called, beloved, to make leaps of faith all the time. All the time. And listen, if this is making you nervous at all, no one here. No. If this is making you nervous at all, congratulations, you are a human being. Because leaps of faith can be slightly nerve-wracking sometimes. Spiritual writer Anne Lamott often quotes the silent film star Dorothy Bernard, who said, "Courage is fear that has said its prayers." Courage is fear that has said its prayers. It takes courage to take a leap of faith sometimes. Sometimes not, but oftentimes it does. And it's okay to be afraid to take that leap. I will tell you, though, doing it consciously, feeling the support of spirit makes it a whole lot easier. So, however you pray, pray first. Pray first. Or if you are ready to embark on taking a big step in your life, you may want to stay after service and pray with a practitioner, or stay online and pray with a practitioner. Anytime you have the opportunity to take a leap of faith, do it with God, with the divine, with unconditional love, with spirit. Recognize that you are not doing that thing alone. No way, no how. And this will fortify you. This will bring you strength. So, all right, that's all fine and good, Shannon. However, what happens when you take a leap and it turns out to be more like a lurch? It happens. It happens to the best of us. I heard this interesting bit of information from a local poet here in Portland. Her name is Joy Sullivan. And she was sharing that when she would look out her window, she would notice squirrels, and they would be jumping from rooftop to power line to pine tree. And she was trying to figure out how they never missed. How is that possible? And so she did a little research because she wanted to understand more deeply how they were able to do that. And she discovered that actually squirrels don't know if they're going to make it. They misjudge all the time. But what they do is they innovate midair. They innovate in midair. They figure out how to catch themselves. And if they've misjudged a step, they collect all sorts of data, just like they collect acorns, to teach themselves how to jump further the next time, how to gauge that leap. So this idea of course correction mid-air made me think about just how much we are being guided by the divine all the time. All the time. And when we are mid-leap, Spirit is right there with us. It was the 19th century naturalist and essayist John Burroughs who wrote the famous quote, "Leap and the net will appear." You've heard that? Leap and the net will appear. The net, my loves, is God. The net is God. It is Spirit supporting you as you continue in all of your humanness to collect helpful data, those acorns of insight and wisdom. And they help us to learn how we can leap further along our divine path. One of the key things in all of this is to ask yourself, especially if you are embarking on a larger leap or choice or step in your life, how will this serve another? Or how will this choice I am making, how will this be of service to the greater good, to even one other person? And this reminded me of a story from the early 20th century. So in the early 20th century, everyone was pursuing human-powered flight, the airplane, right? What a concept. And there was the man. His name was Samuel Langley. He was an astronomer and a physicist, a professor. He happened to be the third secretary at the Smithsonian. He wanted the fortune and the fame of being the very first person on Earth to discover how to make an airplane fly. At the time, he was given $50,000 by the War Department, which was an extraordinary amount of money at that time. The Smithsonian gave him $20,000. This guy was loaded. He had all the resources, all the greatest minds working on this. In fact, he hired all the greatest minds at the time, and he would oversee it. He had people from Harvard. I mean, everyone was on this project. The New York Times was doing articles on him left and right. He was really famous, and everyone just sort of assumed it was going to be him. He did as well. Well, it just so happened there were these two brothers in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. Neither one of them had a college education. No one on their team had a college education. They had very little money. In fact, the only way they were able to fund it were the profits they made from their bicycle shop. And they would often have to bring multiple pieces of equipment because they crashed so many times. They had heart. Unlike Langley, they didn't care about money and fame. They cared about being of service to humanity. They cared about this potential to bring us closer together, to support those in need. That is what they were inspired by. That is what lived in their heart and inspired them to continue making these leaps of faith and course correcting in midair. See what I did there? Until finally on December 17th, 1903, they flew the very first airplane. Nobody remembers Samuel Langley's name because his heart wasn't in it. The Wright brothers had Spirit in them on their side. When we meet our longing, that which we are leaping towards with heart, with the energy of service, the universe kicks into high gear, and every great faith tradition has taught us to lead with our heart Every single one of them. From the ancient wisdom of Hinduism, Krishna explains that he gives knowledge from within the heart. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance and knowledge. The Buddha taught the idea that if anything is worth doing, do it with all your heart. Not with your ego, or the desire to have fame and fortune, but with your heart. That shifts everything. Is there anything wrong with fame and fortune? Of course not. The Wright brothers were still saying their name. Of course not. It's the intention behind it. Remembering that we all belong to each other. With everything that is going on in the world right now, what leap or step could you take? What leap could you take that would help someone or some organization to bring more love, more peace, more justice to our world? There are so many opportunities. It may be very small, it may be very large. Consider the people in your life, the people in our community, the people in your state, your country, our world that need a hand right now. And I invite you to just pay attention to where you are guided to support them in whatever way. In whatever way, and there are a multitude of ways. We have an opportunity to lead with our heart, to leap with our heart, to know that if we need to course correct mid-air, our net is divinity itself, and we are held in all of it, in all of it. In her new book of poetry, Instructions for Traveling West, Joy Sullivan has a poem called Leap. And at the very end of it, she writes, the earth is too hot, and the truth of the matter is we're all up against the clock. It makes everything simple and urgent. There's only time to turn toward what you truly love. There is only time to leap.